Hey, all right. I know it's been a bit. The world has been a little bit, you know. So I guess first of all, my bookshelves look really bare, and they obviously, like, I've got a wall behind me in a way that I've never had before. So I moved last week, and I'm in the same building. I'm still in Chicago. I just had the opportunity to slip into a one-bedroom, have a little bit more space, not feel as cramped, and I have natural light now. So you also may hear some cars because I'm right by the window, but regardless, and a honk you may or may not hear. So today I will have a Future Friday as well, but today I wanted to talk about something I've been thinking a lot about in terms of romance, kind of centered around Sarah MacLean's Daring and the Duke, because I follow a lot of romance writers on Twitter, and that's all obviously a very popular place to be having these conversations. Oh, I realized I didn't tell you my shelves are bare because I moved a lot of the books that I still have to read onto this built-in that exists in the space, and turns out I have a lot of books that I own that I need to read, so that's embarrassing. Anyway, so I wanted to have this conversation about romance and how I read versus how I see other people read, and kind of how I'm jealous of how some people can read based around the conversation in Daring and the Duke by Sarah MacLean. And I also have listened to the Fated Mates podcast episode about this book because Sarah MacLean is a co-host of the podcast, so her co-host Jen interviews her about this book, and they have a really good discussion. I was especially excited because they mentioned The Fair Fight by Anna Freeman, I believe. Sarah mentions it in passing, kind of when talking about Grace being a bare-knuckle fighter, and it was exciting because I love that book, and it's a historical fiction that I actually don't... I saw it a decent amount the year it came out, which was like 2016 or something, and I haven't seen it a whole lot since, which is a shame because the cover, I believe it got a new paperback cover, which I love more than the hardcover. I know, really unusual trend for me. That was a callback to my love of the Washington Black paperback in comparison to the hardcover. Anyway, Daring and the Duke is the last in this specific series. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say the word. Well, I'm not monetized, so I guess it doesn't matter. Anyway, so it followed, this is one that readers of this series have been waiting for because it follows Grace, who is the sibling of Wit and Devil from previous books, and they're also sibling Ewan, and I known as the Duke because he's a Duke. There's a whole backstory there, and I think this kind of gets into it in that hearing people talk about this book, which is fabulous, and I always love her books, there is such a depth to the readership that I can't even compete with. I read a lot of romance, and I love romance, and I love series romance, especially historicals, and I'm unable to read with the callback depth that I see a lot of people have. So people in reading this book have been able to catch on to characters and through lines, not only from this series, but from previous series. And I feel a little dumb in that I haven't caught all of those. Now, granted, it's been a while. I haven't gone back and reread any of these, so that may be part of it. I don't know if, I think it's interesting too how I came to romance just based culturally on the world at the time. So I read fan fiction before I read romance because I think I started reading fan fiction when I was in like 6th grade. Don't tell, my mom didn't know that, but like my first fan fiction was on, the Harry Potter WB message boards, and if anyone came up at that exact moment, because that's a very specific place to have started, you'll remember the pain of that, in that like there were threads and you used to have to like scroll through all of people's comments to get to the next post. So it wasn't just like I could go to the next chapter, like you had to put in the work and you were on a dial-up connection. So it also took a second for that page to load. So that's a little bit of my back in my day, which doesn't feel that long ago, so that's fine. So anyway, so I started there. And then when I was in high school, probably late middle school, I still became an actual romance reader. I had always like kind of slipped some of them. And I remember I read The Other Boleyn Girl in 8th grade. So, but traditional like mass market paperbacks, I still felt a bit of a stigma around them, and I wasn't sure if I was going to be allowed to check them out at the library, but I actually became an assistant at my local library, and the librarians actually handed them to me. That was a very romance positive library, and the other librarians I worked with, which were, you know, women who were older than me, obviously, because I was a teenager, really had no stigma around it. And if they thought I'd like it, they're like, here, you'll like this. And we talked about romance on the clock, and it was really fabulous. So that's kind of where I started. And I don't know necessarily if that's important, in that beyond, like, I've kind of consumed romance that's filled a similar void to me in that fan fiction does, because not like, obviously I'm not only reading fan fiction with happily ever afters, but it's kind of like that mass, I consume them faster, and that's something that's fairly common with the romance reader community. It's known that romance readers go through books very quickly. That being said, I don't know that I retain everything in the way that I should, because I don't know why. It's not that the books aren't memorable, and I still remember things from them. I just don't have that recall. And part of it is also just as I've aged and that I'm reading more. I remember when I was in high school, we had a sub in English class, and it was a former English teacher who also happened to be one of my mom's really good friends. And she like saw my reading log, and she was like, you read how many books this year? And I was like 80 something, I think. I don't remember. She's like, do you remember all of those? And at the time it felt like such a silly question. I was like, of course I remember all of these. Like, I know, like I could tell her what happened in all of those books. And it just seemed like, I don't know how to explain it. It seemed like, oh, you actually like, but now I get it. Now, you know, I read thousands of books, and there are books that I don't recall. It's just the fact of it. So anyway, I guess it's to say I consume a lot of romance, but I don't know that I remember all of the details of those romances as specifically as I would like. So I get very jealous seeing these people able to like connect things back. Like I saw people connecting in this series to other series that Sarah has written in addition to just this series. And the book was very interesting to me for a couple of reasons. I will say, okay, so this book had to kind of turn it had to turn a villain from the previous books into the hero. So he is the hero in this book, but we've seen him do some really awful things. That's a hard thing to do, and I think she succeeded at it, but she succeeded at it in a way that was unexpected for me, in that it was much more internally character driven plot-wise than like an external plot helping drive the thing, right? Like I didn't see them. We saw them in Covent Garden a little bit, I believe, and we saw them like in one ballroom, but like we didn't really, there were whispers of like political things going on, but it didn't really impact the plot in the same way as like the plot of the Rakess was like really driven forward by external circumstances as well as internal circumstances. So this novel had to turn this villain into a hero, and it had to do it within the dynamics of this particular sibling group. So it was very much more internally driven, and I missed some of that external propulsion, but I think it definitely succeeded. That was just, you know, what I tend to like as a reader. I like seeing how the outside world reacts to things too. I don't know that that's needed. I will say one thing that was extremely delightful was that the brothers from the previous books, Devil and Wit, were there kind of almost as like commentary throughout, and they just had snarky things to say, and they were supportive within their own arcs, but it was just funny, and I would pay to see things with their commentary from the MacLean canon, going back to fan fiction, I guess. And I don't like mentioning Harry Potter much right now because of the climate. I'm not really giving money to that anymore because of things that Joanne has said that really anger me. So just know that, but also that was a huge part of my childhood. So a lot of my formative relationships with canons, with literature, with fandom stem from that still. And I've been taking a step back just already before, she'd said a lot of really awful things, because it just felt I was starting to feel oversaturated in a way that I never thought I would. Anyway, to get back to that, there was a very popular fan fiction when I was young. It was like something like, what if the Marauders read Harry Potter? And it just like had the Harry Potter books being reacted to by the Marauders in a way that like probably was not legal, but it was amusing. And I would love to see that version of Devil and Wit kind of commenting even on their own books in like the marginalia. That would be amusing to me. I guess I've lost the plot a little bit here. But yeah, like I'm just jealous. And it's also, I'm thinking about the Bridgerton series that's coming to Netflix with Shonda Rhimes, which I'm very excited about. And if we don't get a Smith-Smith quartet, I'm gonna be upset. But I read those books in high school and I need to revisit them because I don't remember all of the Bridgertons. And I mean, I have still been reading the new series, the like prequel Bridgertons. And like I've caught like the baby Bridgertons referenced, especially in the last book, but also the last book was, I was a little sad about it. It was fine. Yeah, so I guess my thing is, if you are a romance reader and you are able to make these connections in like plot points, in like the random like cameos from characters from previous series, all of that, give me your secrets. Is it rereading before the new book comes out, which I don't know if I can commit to? Like, do I have to wait until they're all out so I can catch it all? I don't have that kind of patience, but sometimes I inadvertently have that kind of patience if I haven't got to. I don't know what I'm saying, but I'm jealous. I'm jealous. So read Daring and the Duke and any other romance that you desire, but especially in the series, what's the secret?